And hello friends, Kurt Berglund with you, and I have more pocket Pennant Run information and experience to share with you on two different subjects today. And I wanted to get this up on the channel because I had kind of an interesting game last night. The title to my video is Pocket Pennant Run, Catcher Throwing Arms, Pitcher Fatigue, and the Tony Kubek Principle. And so I'm going to take those kind of in order. It's kind of an eclectic mix. But I wanted to share some information that I came up with for you. I know as a community for Pocket Pennant Run, almost since the game came out, we've been talking about tweaks, modification, homebrew rules to modify the charts or in some other way tweak things to maybe make the game fit our needs a little bit better. But I want to give you two cautionary pieces of information that I've stumbled upon. One is a piece of research and the other one is from a game experience that I played just last night. So we'll start with the research and the catcher throwing arms. Let's take a look at a couple of the cards and I'll show you what I'm talking about right now. What you see in front of you is my copies of my printout of two particular teams. The 1982 Milwaukee Brewers and the 1982 California Angels. And I've been thinking about the modification of the catcher arms having an impact on stolen base ratings and stolen base outcomes. So for example, we know that this is our base running card for Pocket Pennant Run. And we know that this is basically undisturbed by catcher throwing arms in the rules for the game. So if you have an A stealer trying to steal second base, he will be out on rolls of 1 and 2, and for a steal of second, he'll be safe from rolls of 3 through 12, no matter what the catcher throwing arm is. And we've talked as a community, both on Facebook and certainly the comments that I've gotten on my videos, how should the catcher have an impact on this card, or to subtract, maybe take an A stealer if you have an A-rated defensive catcher. Maybe you knock that A stealer down to the B column because that A defensive catcher would presumably be better at throwing out base runners. All right, so let's test that and see what we have here. We have two wonderful catchers from my era, Ted Simmons and Bob Boone. And in 1982, of course, both of these men were part of division-winning teams. Ted Simmons was part of the starting catcher for the Brewers. Bob Boone was the starting catcher for the Angels. Now, Simmons' defensive rating is an A. Simmons had a wonderful year as a catcher. I think he made 1 or 2 errors, something. It was just a ridiculously high fielding percentage. Boone did as well. And so both men, under the D column for defense, both men are rated A. And so it would be tempting, if we were to make these adjustments, it would be tempting to come back here and say, okay, well, if you have an A base stealer on base, like, I don't know, Ricky Henderson or something, and either Simmons or Boone was the catcher, because they have those A ratings, they would qualify to knock the catcher down to a B grade. Or I'm sorry, to knock the base runner down to a B stealing attempt grade. It would be tempting to do that. But then I ran some numbers. So let's take a look at what the data says about 1982 catchers. All right, these are my notes. So for Ted Simmons, this is just my title here for my notes: Pocket Pennant Run, Homebrew Rules, Catcher Throwing. All right, so Simmons in 1982 had a 36% caught stealing rate. And as it, we know sort of since then, and due to the work of Bill James and others, 65% or so, or thereabouts, sometimes some studies say 70%, that's your break-even point, at which you're better off stealing. If you're above 65 or 70%, you're better off stealing, and it's worth the risk if you're going to be safe that often. So Simmons threw out runners out at 36% in 1982. Now again, what that gave, part of this, now I don't think that throwing arm is part of this rating. I don't know, but I don't think so. Anyway, he got the A defensive grade by the Pocket Pennant Run defensive grade. All right, now Bob Boone in 1982. Now Bob Boone did not throw well in 1980 and 1981. His numbers are not good. Now it's possible that the pitching coach for the Phillies just didn't think holding runners was a very important task for pitchers. I don't know, but Gene Mauch certainly did, and Bob Boone's caught stealing rate in 1982 is 58%. Bob Boone caught 58% of the base runners trying to steal a base in the year 1982. Both of these men are in the same seasons. Bob Boone's defensive grade in 1982 is an A. So is Ted Simmons. But notice there's a 22% difference between these two men. Okay, now you might be saying to yourself, okay, Kurt, that's fine and dandy, but what's the league average? How does this compare to the rest of the American League or the rest of baseball in 1982? And the 1982 caught stealing league average is 36%. So Simmons is right on the league average. Boone is 22% ahead of the league average. Both of these men were full-time catchers, and both of them have a letter grade of A. So if, as we come back to the card, if we were to say, okay, Bob Boone and Ted Simmons are both going to knock, because of their A grade on defense, they're going to knock these base stealers down a letter grade. Realize what you're doing is you're saying that Simmons and Boone had basically the same impact on stolen bases when they were actually 22% apart in effectiveness in stealing out runners and throwing out runners. So I don't know what to make of all this. One thing that seems clear to me, however, and that I am feeling comfortable about, is that not if you're an A, but if you are a catcher with a D rating, if you're at the bottom of the catching grade, I'm wondering if we don't do the bump up. So in other words, if you have a B stealer and he's facing a D catcher, maybe he gets a boost to an A. I don't know. That's another idea for a rule tweak, a homebrew mod. But looking at this data has given me pause about reducing stolen base chances on the base running card by a letter grade just because the catcher is rated an A for defense, because we now see that there isn't a relationship really between the letter grade and throwing arm, so we might be getting some results we're not comfortable with. that's just something to think about as you go forward. It's certainly on my mind about this whole issue of catcher throwing. So that's issue number 1 for today. Issue number 2 for today that I want to talk to you about has to do with the pitcher fatigue rule in Pocket Pennant Run. Now, we know that each pitcher has a number, and then that inning, now it could be affected by giving up 5 runs or more. That could change the fatigue as well, but let's forget that for the moment. Just the natural fatigue, every pitcher has a number, and after they reach that inning, they drop a letter grade. And then every inning subsequent to that, they drop a letter grade. Well, I was playing a game last night with the 1950 Philadelphia Phillies against the 1992 Atlanta Braves. Don't ask. It's my particular kind of illness. So, I'm playing a game with those two teams. The opposing pitchers were John Smoltz for the 1992 Braves. He is a B pitcher, effectiveness grade. And Robin Roberts was the starter for the 1950 Phillies. He is an A pitcher for effectiveness. Both men have a fatigue number, an inning number of 7. I want to show you my score sheet and talk to you about what happened. But before I do that, I want to remind you about Tony Kubek, who was one of my favorite announcers back in the 70s. I used to love Joe and Tony. I just sort of missed the end of Kurt Gowdy and Tony Kubek. But my game of the week guys were Joe Garagiola and Tony Kubek. And one of the things that I remember to this day Tony Kubek talking about, and you can still find videos of him on YouTube talking about this, about the impact of the designated hitter rule. And one of the things he said about it was that it's going to have the effect of managers leaving starting pitchers in the game longer that they would otherwise be pinch hitting for. That, in turn, will lead to longer outings and more innings pitched by American League starting pitchers. And that, in turn, will lead to potentially more injuries for those starting pitchers as the managers just leave them in there because they don't have to worry about pinch hitting for them. Well, that brings me to the game last night. We've talked as a community about if the pitcher, a starting pitcher especially, is doing well in the game. Maybe he's throwing a shutout. We don't reduce him for fatigue when the inning limit is reached. We don't reduce him then. What if we tried that? So if we have Robin Roberts, for example, as an A pitcher, he hits the 8th inning, but he's throwing a shutout, we leave him at an A grade. Or John Smoltz, for example, he's a B pitcher. He reaches the 8th inning, he's throwing a shutout, we leave him as a B. What happens then? And what might happen in your games? Well, I learned something about myself, and I think I learned something about the game last night as well. Let me show you by showing you my scorecard. I know my writing is hard to read, and believe me, you're not the first people to think that. I've got my score sheet labeled. The 92 Braves were the visiting team. The 50 Phillies were the home team. This is my A mod. So I label these score sheets where I'm playtesting these homebrew rules. So the game, as you can see, cruises along here, and we have dual shutouts going on. So this is a perfect test case for ignoring the fatigue number and leaving the starting pitcher grades where they are. What happened? Okay, well, let's go to the 8th inning. We have dual shutouts going. We go to the 8th inning. We have John Smoltz. Now, with a dual shutout going, and Smoltz if we played by the normal rules for the game, Smoltz, who's leading off the 8th inning, he's gone through his 7 innings and he has thrown a shutout to this point. The game is a scoreless tie. It would be very tempting, because Smoltz would be going from a B to a C grade in inning number 8 normally. It would be very tempting to pinch hit for him leading off the 8th inning. But because he was not because he was not being reduced in letter grade because of fatigue, he was meeting my criteria of throwing the shutout. I did not pinch hit for him. I let him lead off the 8th inning. He flew out to left field, and then the other 2 Braves, Otis Nixon and then Jeff Blauser. Nixon struck out, Blauser grounded out, and that ended the Braves' 8th. But I would have pinch hit for Smoltz here because he was dropping to a C grade, and I think I would have tried to get Deion Sanders in there or someone to pinch hit for him against Robin Roberts, and instead I did not do that. So what happened? Smoltz went on to pitch the bottom of the 8th. Now later on in the 10th inning, I did pinch hit for Smoltz with Jeff Treadway, as you can see here, and Treadway struck out. But Smoltz got 2 more innings in the bottom of the 8th, and the bottom of the 9th to pitch that he would not have otherwise gotten. Here's what happened for the Phillies. This is the Phillies scorecard. Now Roberts, as you can see, went on. He had a fatigue limit of 7. He was an A pitcher. And you can see that I did not pinch hit for Roberts. Now in the bottom of the 8th, Roberts was also up. Here again, I might have. He's dropping to a B. He would have dropped to a B in the top of the 8th had I not been using this homebrew rule of keeping his letter grade. He would have dropped to a B in the top of the 8th. I probably would have left him in there to pitch the 8th, but I certainly would have pinch hit for him here in the bottom of the 8th, because in the 9th he'd be a C. And I've got Jim Constanti waiting in the Phillies bullpen, who's an A, and I just would have made the switch here. But instead of that, Andy Semenuk led off the bottom of the 8th with a single. Then I had Mike Goliat's spot coming up, and so I had Dick Whitman, not John Hamm, but Dick Whitman, pinch hit for Mike Goliat here, and he flew out to left field. Then I didn't want to hit for Roberts because he was still an A, so I had Roberts bunt, and he bunted Semenuk to second. That was followed up by a ground out to first by Eddie Waitkus, and that ended the Phillies' 8th. Smoltz pitching here, and Smoltz pitching in the bottom of the 9th as well. What did Roberts do? Well, for Roberts, we come back up to the Braves score sheet, and Roberts pitched the 8th, which I probably would have let him do. He was an A, though, with my mod. He pitched the 9th as an A, still throwing a shutout. Got through that fine. Pitched the 10th, which, of course, Robin Roberts, in real life, or as the kids like to say, IRL, pitched plenty of extra inning games. In fact, he pitched an extra inning game the day the Phillies clinched the pennant in 1950. Then, in the 10th, I did pinch hit for Roberts in the bottom of the 10th. I had a chance for the Phillies to win the game with 2 outs, and I did pinch hit for him in the 10th. It didn't work out. I brought in Constanti in the 11th, and Ron Gant hit a home run off of him, and it ended up being a 2-0 Braves victory in extra innings. But, notice what happened for both pitchers. Smoltz got 2 more innings than he otherwise would have gotten, and Roberts got the 9th and the 10th. He also got 2 more innings than he probably otherwise would have gotten. What's the big deal? Who cares? Well, the big deal is that you're starting, if we go with this modification here, with keeping the letter grade for the starting pitcher, who is doing well. Your starting pitchers are going to have, and this is the Tony Kubek principle. Kubek, of course, was talking about the DH. I'm talking about this modification. Your starting pitchers will have more innings pitched as a result of this mod than they would if you were going by the regular game rules. That's okay if you're okay with that. What that means is your starting pitchers will go longer. Your runs scored will go down a little bit, I'm guessing, although I don't have data for that, but I'm thinking your runs scored will drop. So with this modification, not only are you getting the chance for pitchers to throw shutouts, but you're also probably going to increase your starting pitcher's innings pitched, and you're probably going to depress your runs scored both by a little bit. Those are just a couple of things related to the Tony Kubek principle that I talked about a minute ago that would be unintended consequences, for better or for worse, as a result of modifying the fatigue rule in Pocket Pennant Run. That's just food for thought for today. On Friday of this week, I'll be doing a full game demo of Pocket Pennant Run, and again on Sunday as well. So come on back for those. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I appreciate all of your support. Have a wonderful day. So long, everybody.